Hello, this is Tony Hiller from RealClimateScience.com. In his ongoing efforts to misinform the public about energy and climate, Joe Biden's climate advisor John Kerry continues to spew out meaningless and incorrect statistics about weather. We're seeing impacts in every country of the world, the worst drought in Chinese history, unprecedented floods in Pakistan, and heat waves in the United States. Temperatures 100 degrees above normal in Antarctica, and every year we now lose 10 million of our human beings globally to extreme heat and air pollution. According to Oxford University, death rates from all types of natural disasters, including meteorological and climate events, are down 95% over the last century. And over the past decade, deaths from all types of natural disasters averaged about 45,000 per year. Kerry's last statistic was completely fake. Now let's look at his claim about unprecedented floods in Pakistan. In 1970, East Pakistan was flooded by the storm surge and rain from the Bola cyclone. It killed 500,000 people. During the 1970s, flooding in Pakistan was blamed on global cooling. Time magazine, June 24, 1974, another ice age. In Africa, drought continues for the sixth consecutive year, adding terribly to the toll of famine victims. During 1972, record rains in parts of the U.S., Pakistan, and Japan caused some of the worst flooding in centuries. Telltale signs are everywhere, from the unexpected persistence and thickness of pack ice in the waters around Iceland to the southward migration of a warmth-loving creature like the armadillo from the Midwest. Since the 1940s, the mean global temperatures dropped about 2.7 degrees Fahrenheit. Kerry's claims about unprecedented floods in Pakistan are also just fake news. Now let's look at his claim of Antarctica being 100 degrees above normal. Last winter in Antarctica was the coldest on record. Washington Post, October 2nd, 2021. Brutal cold in Antarctica, impressive even for the coldest place on planet Earth. The end of September came close to the world record for lowest temperature ever recorded. This winter has also been extremely cold in Antarctica, with the cold air streaming up into Australia, South Africa, and South America. Almost 3 weeks into their spring, Australia is still getting very heavy snowfall. This is due to extremely cold air coming from Antarctica. So once again, more irrelevant news from the Biden administration in an attempt to misinform the public. Kerry said that the drought in China is the worst in their history. That claim is particularly ridiculous and offensive. In 1931, it was reported that China's had a major famine almost every year since 108 BC. In the 2 years famine of 1877 and 1878, it's estimated that 9.5 million people starved to death in China. Other estimates put the death count from that heatwave, drought, and famine at 20 million. In 1878, parents in China were selling their children because they couldn't afford to feed them, and they couldn't afford to feed themselves. There were so many people dying that the dead were just left out in the open and were being devoured by birds and beasts. There was a worldwide heat wave and drought in 1878, which killed 10 million people in India, 20 million people in China, and as many as 1 million people in Brazil. During the winter of 1877 to 1878, there was no winter weather in Minnesota. It's not difficult to imagine the mass global warming hysteria which would occur now if there was a repeat of the winter of 1878. In 1877, Burke, New South Wales, set the state's all-time record temperature of 52.8 degrees Celsius. This was reported by the Australian Bureau of Meteorology in 1995, but they've since erased all the inconvenient data before 1910. Every single claim from John Kerry so far was fraudulent. Now let's look at the claim about unprecedented heat waves in the United States. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration shows that heat waves in the United States were much worse in the past. The frequency of hot days in recent years has been among the lowest on record. The average maximum temperature in the United States peaked in 1934, with the second hottest being 1921. In 1921, there was a global heat wave and drought. The New York Herald reported, "The great heat wave which has spread over the world during the present summer has no parallel in history. There have been hot waves, there have been famines, there have been pestilences at various times and in many places, but none so blighting and terrible as 1921. Abnormally high temperatures have prevailed in almost all parts of the northern hemisphere and have continued for an unprecedented length of time. Millions of people in Europe, Russia, and Asia were facing death from 1921's record heat wave. In 1921, Lake Morad in Switzerland dried up. Here is live imagery from Lake Morad in Switzerland. You can see that the lake is full up to the brim today. The New York Times reported in 1921 that Earth was hottest for 50 years. Many disasters of recent months ascribed to high temperatures and lack of moisture. They said Earth had a fever manifested in a worldwide heat wave of unusual length and intensity. 2 million Koreans starving in Manchuria. Drought kills fish in River Seine, and France suffers most severe drought in 47 years. London had an unprecedented heat wave during October 1921 when they had several days above 80 degrees Fahrenheit. That was about 30 degrees above normal. Some of the worst floods in U.S. history occurred during 1921, including one at Pueblo, Colorado, which may have killed as many as 1,500 people. That flood came 3 weeks after one of the largest solar storms on record. On this date in 1921, it was 102 degrees at Caruthersville, Missouri. During the first 20 days of that month, they averaged 100 degrees Fahrenheit. To put that in perspective, Caruthersville hasn't recorded a 100-degree temperature during September since 1954. In 1925, Caruthersville reached 108 degrees during September. Many states, including Texas, had their hottest year in 1921. Illinois also had their hottest year during 1921. The disastrous heat and drought of 1921 was blamed on the solar system passing through a vast unseen cosmic cloud at a time when sunspots were hottest. The U.S. Weather Bureau reported a radical change in Arctic climate conditions and hitherto unheard of high temperatures. Many old landmarks are so changed as to be unrecognizable. Where formerly great masses of ice were found, there are now often moraines, accumulations of earth and stones. At many points where glaciers formerly extended far into the sea, they have entirely disappeared. Water temperatures around Spitsbergen warmed up 12 degrees, and during the winter of 1921-1922, the ocean did not freeze over even on the north coast of Spitsbergen. You can see from this map that there was no ice around Spitsbergen that winter. The leading Arctic expert of the time, Dr. Hans Ullmann, showed a tremendous warming at Spitsbergen. He also showed very rapid warming in Norway and very rapid glacial retreat. The glaciers in Glacier National Park were melting so quickly, experts predicted they would all be gone before the year 1950. Explorer Stephenson reported that the ice between the North Pole and Alaska was young, thin, moving, rotten ice. But never mind the record heat, record drought, and melting glaciers, NASA shows 1921 as being one of the coldest years around the world. Reality doesn't suit the U.S. government agenda, so they simply rewrite it. On every single topic, Joe Biden's climate advisor John Kerry was spreading gross misinformation. Bad policy based on this misinformation is making food and energy unaffordable for the poor and middle class. There's nothing new about fake climate statistics. In 1871, the Brisbane Courier reported imaginary changes of climate. 3 consecutive years of drought, while they've stimulated the inventive resources of practical agriculturalists, have had the natural effect of calling forth a plentiful crop of speculation from weather prophets and projectors and half-instructed meteorologists, and all the philosophic tribe of Laputa in general, to whom the periodical press now affords such fatal facilities. We've often noticed that in the tabular statements of those compilers of weather records who write to the Times, useful and welcome as their communications are, every season is sure to be extraordinary. Almost every month one of the driest or wettest or windiest, coldest or hottest ever known. Much observation which ought to correct a tendency to exaggerate seems in some minds to have rather a tendency to increase it. And in 1906, a climatology professor at Harvard said that belief in climate change is based on faulty memories. Humans have always been plagued by climate superstition, but what's different now is that governments are using this superstition to crush the poor and middle class. Toto has been pulling back the curtain on this massive disinformation campaign from the government, press, and academia for the past 14 years. You can visit him, Kyrie Caesar, Toki and Upala on the web at realclimatescience.com.